My name is Bruce Alexander. I'm President and CEO of Vectra Bank Colorado, and I'm pleased this morning to welcome you to our 23rd annual Economic Forecast Breakfast. You know, they say that the stock show is the one that's responsible for snow and cold weather. I actually think it's the Vectra Bank Economic Forecast that's responsible for this. I'm just glad, as many of you have told us, that this was today as opposed to yesterday. I'm sure some of you might not have come out in the cold. But anyway, we're delighted to have you here, and we're really excited about our event today. I also want to welcome our colleagues across the state of Colorado who are watching and participating in this event on our live webcast. We have some 38 branches across the state of Colorado, and we want to try to bring this kind of economic information and insight to all of our customers and colleagues around the state. Before we get to our speakers, I'd like to take a minute to recognize the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation and the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce for their support these past years. A special welcome to Tom Clark and Kelly Bruff, who've been active supporters and sponsors of this event with us over the years. They also have a number of their economic development partners with them at their table today, who are just key as you've seen the economic growth across the state in Colorado. The title of our event today is What to Expect in 2016, Return to Routine. Each year we try our hand at predicting the economy when developing the theme for this event. And you might wonder, why the hell would we land on this particular title of Return to Routine, since the start of 2016 seems to be anything but routine. So far, we've seen one of the worst starts of the stock market in any calendar year, with continued dramatic volatility, historic lows in oil prices, uncertainty in the global economies, and even talk of perhaps a recession somewhere looming out in the future. And that's interesting because it's contrasted with what's going on here in Colorado, where we're actually faring very well, with unemployment down, entrepreneurism and job growth very high, and a strong and growing real estate environment. So will we see things normalize? Will we see the Colorado economy avoid another boom-bust cycle? Will U.S. GDP settle in at 2 to 3%, the routine we've seen in past years? And what will we see for returns in the stock market? Our two speakers today will focus on where we ended 2015 and what we can expect to see in the year ahead. Patty Silverstein is Chief Economist for the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, joins us again this year to kick off the morning. And although she is one of our favorite repeat speakers at the event, she also is anything but routine. Get that? Ties back to the routine? You got that, sorry. They write this stuff for me, I apologize. And we look forward, Patty, to all the things that you're going to bring to us today. And joining us for the first time is Bert White, the Managing Director of Research and Chief Investment Officer for LPL Financial. Bert will share some observations and expectations for the year ahead from his own dealings and from his research team. And I had the chance to chat with him this morning before our event, and I think you're going to be really excited to hear from him. We're proud to have Bert and LPL Financial as our wealth management advisory partners, and so pleased to share this valuable resource with all of you today. As always, we'll have time at the end to give you access to both of these experts. At any time, you can submit your questions using the QR code that's printed on your centerpieces. We'd also appreciate your comments or questions via Twitter at #VectraForecast. To our webcast participants, you can submit your question right on the webcast homepage at any time. When our time this morning concludes, we will certainly we won't have all of the answers that you're looking for, but we hope you'll gain insights and tools to make the critical decisions for your families, businesses, and the communities that we all serve. At the core of all of our events and our brand at Vectra Bank Colorado is the commitment to add value to you, our customers, and our colleagues by providing the information and solutions you need to anticipate what's ahead. So hopefully we'll get that done this morning. So let's get started. I'm happy to introduce you to Patty Silverstein, well-versed on the local economy. Patty is the consulting chief economist for the Metro Denver Economic Development Corporation, author of the Chamber's monthly Economic Indicators Report, and also president of Development Research Partners, a real estate analysis and economic development research company. We're also honored that she has become a staple of Vectra's annual economic forecast. Please welcome Patty.
Good morning. I am delighted to be back here again to talk about the economy with you. What better way to start our day, right? So I want to talk about the economy today in terms of intersections. How our economy, how the employment situation intersects with population growth, how our population growth intersects or connects with the housing market, all of these kind of interrelationships that we see out there. And certainly one of the other aspects that I want to take a look at today is that, like any good business, you need to know what your competitors are doing. So today I want to share with you too how Metro Denver's competitors are doing. Because in the economic development world, certainly we want to know how indeed our market compares to those other markets. So starting first of all with employment, we're going to touch on such issues as employment growth, our industry clusters, and what's going on with our average salary, and how this all relates to our commercial real estate market. Starting first of all at the broad level of what's going on here within the state of Colorado. So these are all of the states that border Colorado on this chart, just a kind of a regional feel for how the economy is doing here. Notice that in Colorado, we went from number 41 in terms of the employment growth rate, which felt really bad. Remember that back in 2010? Ooh. That was followed in 2014 by zooming up to number 3 in terms of employment growth. Now for 2015, we're kind of settling in this top 10, top 15 type of mark. All of these figures will be revised in March, so we'll have a better sense really then. But we're still probably, we're still doing pretty well here in Colorado. I want to draw your attention though to one of our key competitors, Utah. Look at that. Utah is at number 1 in terms of employment growth right now. We pay very close attention to what's going on there in Utah because they have been coming on strong with a very diversified economic base. They've seen a lot of entrepreneurial activity, innovation going on there. So we're definitely keeping a close eye on them. Now, last year's number 1 state is not a state that borders on Colorado. Last year, actually in 2014, the number 1 growth state was North Dakota. North Dakota had held that number 1 position for the past 6 years. And you know what? In 2015, they fell to number 46. Certainly shows the influence that oil and gas can have on our economy. And certainly that is one of the issues that we're looking at here in Colorado. And indeed, when we take a look at all of our metropolitan statistical areas in Colorado, we see a very different picture this year from the 2015 data than we did in 2014. That Greeley area, which is essentially Weld County, went from a 9% growth rate to about a 5% growth rate. Again, that has been really where the bulk of the oil and gas activity in the state has been focused most recently. So the decline in that growth rate was expected. What it continues to boost that whole Weld County economy, however, is the clean tech side, the alternative energy side, where we continue to see Vestas growing by leaps and bounds there within that area. So certainly that's been kind of a good news, bad news story for the Weld County area. Notice there too, the Grand Junction has been kind of growing at the slowest pace here in the state of Colorado. They have had difficulties in trying to diversify their economic base following the prior oil boom periods. So they're still challenged by that, but nonetheless, they are back onto a growth track once again. Here in the Metro Denver region, where we represent over 60% of the jobs, we have a very diversified economic base, and indeed the activity that we see going on within the Metro Denver region tends to drive what we see going on all throughout the state. So how does Metro Denver compare then to the U.S.? So notice first of all, that in Metro Denver, we recovered all of the jobs that we had lost during the Great Recession by the beginning of 2013. And indeed, 2013, 2014, very strong growth years for our region, that, at rates of over 3.5%. This was a period of time when throughout this whole Metro Denver area, and by that I'm generally talking about a 7-county region that goes from Douglas County on the south all the way up into Adams and Boulder counties on the north. So within that whole 7-county region, over the 2013 and 2014, we added roughly 50,000 net new jobs each year. So notice now in 2016, we do expect a slightly slower employment growth rate, down to that about 2.9%. This means we're going to be adding more along the lines of about 45,000 net new jobs. So nonetheless, still a nice addition to our employment base here within the metro region. So how are our competitors doing? So amidst this crazy chart here, I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, all of our competitors are of different sizes. So we're indexing the employment prior to the recession to a value of 100 in June of 2007. And then we can then see when values go above the 100 line, that means that they've been expanding. When they're below that, they're still contracting. A few words about who our competitors are. So by the competitors, we're looking at these areas of the country that we typically compete against for job expansions and relocations. So when a company is considering, okay, if I'm going to open up a new facility, should I open it up in the Metro Denver area? Should I open it up in Portland? Should I open it up in Austin, Salt Lake City? These are our key competitor locations as these companies are making these plans to grow and expand. You will notice that there are no California cities on the list. We have a very different relationship with California. Oftentimes it's that San Francisco company, that Los Angeles company that is thinking of expanding outside of that marketplace and wondering, should I put my facility in Metro Denver? Should I put it up in Portland? So that's why very different relationship there, and that's why we don't have them on this chart necessarily. So a few things to notice about this. Austin was hardly even touched by the Great Recession. They have continued to grow and expand their employment base all over the years. Dallas was also one of the first areas to come out of the Great Recession. They bobbled a bit during the recessionary period, but then they were one of the first to come out. And notice now Metro Denver and Salt Lake, we have been neck and neck in terms of employment growth rates. So again, it's very important then that we pay attention to what these areas are doing as well. And then there's Phoenix down there in the orange. Notice that it was not until the last few months, really, that Phoenix recovered all of the jobs that they had lost during the Great Recession. So why do we think the Metro Denver region is performing so well? Why indeed were we one of the first areas of the country to come out of the Great Recession and go on to this whole new growth track within our area? Well, we believe that it's really because of our focus on our industry clusters. Our economic development strategy in the Metro Denver region relies very heavily upon these industry clusters. These are the industries that as they start to increase, it lifts up the entire economic structure here in the Metro Denver area. And notice now there are 9 industry clusters because we have added a new one, beverage production. And I know you're thinking, yeah, it's all the beer. It's not just beer. Okay, certainly our large breweries, all of our craft breweries that we have here, very important to our economic base, and definitely helping to increase our whole employment base here. But it's also sports drinks, soft drinks, wineries, distilleries, milk products, coffee, tea. All of these beverages that are being produced in this region really bring us to one of the very strongest concentrations of employment in the country. Indeed, the Metro Denver region ranks 3rd in terms of employment concentration when it comes to all of that beverage production. So you may remember this industry cluster chart, this bubble chart. Just to get your bearings on this, on the bottom axis then is the growth rate in the various industries over the past year. And you will see by looking at that far right side, clean tech. Again, that's the alternative energy, renewable energies, has been the fastest growing industry cluster here in the Metro Denver region over the past year. The prior year, it was fossil fuels, because in our industry clusters, we actually wrap in Weld County and Larimer County into the information. So it had been fossil fuels that had been growing the most rapidly. Still saw a little bit of growth occurring in the fossil fuel category in 2015, but we expect that that is going to probably contract a little bit more in 2016. Now, the size of these bubbles represents the size of the employment base. You will see that the healthcare and wellness bubble, that big pink bubble, is indeed our largest employment base here. This has been an industry that has been just continuing to grow and expand over the past 12 years, a very consistent performer within our region. The lime green bubble there is our beverage production side. Again, as I had said, we have the third strongest concentration of employment in the beverage out of the 50 largest metropolitan areas in that beverage production cluster. And indeed, when we take a look at our output here in Colorado, just in terms of the beer category, again, our large breweries as well as our craft breweries, we see that we are number one in per capita output in the country. Up and down on the chart then is our location quotient, which refers to that strength of that employment concentration. You will see that aerospace is still up there at 4.5, meaning that our employment concentration in aerospace 4.5 times the national average. Indeed, Colorado has one of the largest aerospace bases in the country. We zoomed up to number 2 again. Okay, we're number 2. Last year we were number 3. We added a few employees, and our next closest competitor did not add at quite as rapid of a pace. So we are now, once again, the number 2 aerospace economy in the country, which we are pretty excited about, second only to the state of California. Now, I could talk for hours about all of the clusters and about all of the key trends that we see going on within these clusters, but Bruce wouldn't give me enough time to do that. So instead, I encourage you that if there are any of these industries that you want to find out more information about those key trends, who the key players are, the workforce issues, that type of thing, go to www.metrodenver.org. We have full cluster reports on all of these. They're available at no charge. Again, lots of great information that is out there. So these are employment growing and expanding, but you've all heard that all we're doing are adding all these low-wage positions, right? Not true. Here in the Metro Denver region, we have the highest average salary of any of our competitor locations, and indeed, our average salaries have been increasing at a faster pace than all of our competitor locations. So certainly as our industry clusters increase, we are leading again to an increase in our overall employment base, an increase in the overall wages that we are seeing within the region. And as I'll talk about in a moment, those wages we expect to be growing at a continued strong pace. So what does this mean for our commercial real estate markets? As Bruce had mentioned, yes, we have indeed seen very strong real estate markets here in the Metro Denver region. In fact, when we take a look at office, industrial, retail, in general, we have been seeing declining vacancy rates and increasing average lease rates. We did see a little bit of a bobble in the industrial side where that vacancy rate actually went up by 0.1%. But again, that industrial market has been very, very tight. So that little bit of increase in that vacancy has actually been very welcome within the region because, as many companies can attest, it has been very difficult to find the type of industrial space that is needed in our marketplace. All of this is leading to more construction activity. In total, we have over 5 million square feet of new office, industrial, and retail space that was completed in 2015, and about another 7 million square feet that continues under construction. The construction industries will tell you that it is challenging for them to find the workers that they need to complete all of this space right now, because again, we have this very low unemployment rate within our region. So how does this employment growth then connect with the population expansion that we are seeing here within the Metro Denver region? Well, the greatest connection is through that unemployment rate. Notice that the unemployment rate in our region has declined to our pre-recession value of 3.8%, and it is expected to continue to go down in 2016. We expect about a 3.5% unemployment rate in the area. So for our companies out there, it is challenging to find those workers that you need. You have to get a little creative in terms of retaining and attracting those workers there. So you may have to start to see a bit up in wages, a bit up in benefits, a bit up in amenities that are offered to the workers to try to lure them to your company. Because of this, we are seeing then an increase in our population base. As people look out across the country and say, where can I see better opportunities for myself, my household? The Metro Denver region has certainly been one of those areas that is top of mind. We have been a region that has been attracting all of those millennials as well as other generational groups, but certainly the millennials have been migrating into the region in a very strong manner. The migration activity is demonstrated by the gray part of that bar. The green part reflects our natural increase. So even if nobody moved in or out of the region, we'd continue to see an increasing population, but it is indeed that migration activity that tends to drive a lot of our economic performance here as well. So all of these folks that are moving into the Metro Denver region, they need some housing, right? We have seen a very consistent performance in our home sales market. We've been, selling around 56,000 homes per year. Again, that represents maybe about 18 home sales per thousand, which is a little bit above our historic norm. Our historic norm is about 17, but certainly much better than the depths of the recession when we're only selling maybe about 13 homes per thousand people. So a very consistent type of sales activity. But the challenge is it's gotten a little pricey here. Median home price in the Metro Denver region now at about $350,000. That means half of the homes sold are selling less than that, half of the homes selling for more than that. We have seen in 2015 nearly a 13% increase, 13% appreciation in our home prices. And notice that difference between the Metro Denver median price and the national home price has indeed gotten wider. So this is really what I feel one of our greatest challenges is for the growth in our region is the affordability of housing within the region. And so some of you may say, well, if you can't afford to buy a home, let's just rent. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But on our competitor side, notice here that the Metro Denver region, we have the highest median home prices of our competitors, and they have been increasing at a faster pace. So again, on the Phoenix side, not to be picking on Phoenix here by any stretch but in Phoenix, their home prices have not even recovered to the point that they had been. Our closest competitor in terms of that pricing point here is probably Portland. And Portland has now been ranked as about the second fastest growing economy in terms of home prices recently. So Portland is coming on strong. Austin home prices have also been increasing at a very fast pace. So again, like I say, in case you're thinking that, well, gee, I really can't afford to buy a home, I'm just going to rent. The rental market here in the Metro Denver regions remains very tight. We did see an increase in that vacancy rate, that apartment vacancy rate in the fourth quarter, up to about increased to over 5% then in this current quarter, averaging about 5.3% throughout all of 2015. So we're seeing some loosening in the market as we have seen new homes come online, new apartment complexes that have been opening, but still a relatively tight marketplace. Indeed, this is leading to apartment rental rates that are quite high for a lot of people, again, to afford. We're looking at an average apartment rental rate of just under $1,300 in the metro region. These prices are ranging from about $1,200 in Adams County up to about $1,500 per month in the Boulder-Broomfield marketplace. These are the averages for all types of units, everything from the efficiencies on up to the 2-3 bedrooms. So certainly if you're going for larger types of properties, you're going to be paying significantly more than that. So what are we doing then to try to temper some of those price increases? Well, certainly in the marketplace now, we are building additional product. In fact, when we take a look at the number of single-family and multifamily units coming on board in the Metro Denver region, we'll see that we're at about 18,000. Our historic average is about 17,000 units, so we're finally building up at a level up above our historic norm there. We've seen a bit of an increase recently, again, in single-family detached units. Notice that multifamily had represented the bulk of the marketplace. Upwards of 58% of the new units that were coming on board were multifamily units in 2012. That's back down to about 43%. Our historic norm would put us at 25%. So I don't think that we're going to return to the days of that 25% mark, certainly because of the changes in our demographic structure here. The millennials, the baby boomers are looking for more of those carefree types of options when it comes to housing. So we'll continue to see more of that multifamily construction. But nonetheless, we're starting to see a bit of an equalization or a return to normalcy, maybe a return to routine when it comes to the types of units that are being constructed in the region. So the new people coming in here, they're just clogging up our roads, right? Well, according to the Texas Transportation Institute, our level of congestion now is no worse than it had been prior to the Great Recession. You believe that? Okay. Anyway, that's according to the data in terms of the number of hours of delay. So what are we doing to remedy that situation? Well, we have fast tracks. 5 new segments of fast tracks coming online in 2016. We have the Flatiron Flyer, that is that bus rapid transit line between Boulder and Union Station. We have Line A, the A line, coming from Denver Union Station out to Denver International Airport, opening in the spring. That presents great new opportunities for businesses, for tourists, for all of us in terms of accessibility, mobility throughout our region. And then we have the B line to Westminster that'll be opening up in the summer. The G line, which is that Wheat Ridge Arvada line, that will be opening up in the fall. And then in winter, the R line along I-225. This is changing the development patterns throughout Metro Denver. It's changing our mobility patterns throughout Metro Denver, providing some great opportunities for us to really propel us, to give us that mobility that we need to move on into the future. With that, thank you so much. Have a fabulous 2016.
You know, I'm always fascinated to have Patty here. Patty, thank you so much. The depth and amount of information in her talk is really incredible, and we can get these slides for you if you're interested. We'll have them on the Vectra Bank website because I think there's so much critical data. And Tom Clark, I think your industry cluster discussion is so interesting, and Patty, to see it change year over year, who would have thought that the fossil fuels growth rate would have been replaced by clean tech? And what a dramatic shift in the makeup of our economy. Who would have also thought that beer, Mike Marino, one of our lenders who's become an expert in lending to beer providers, would become such a prominent part of our economy. I think one of the interesting things about this event is anticipating what's coming and what's changing. And even this discussion about wages and how they're growing as nicely as they are in Colorado, that's great for our employees, but a little bit tougher for us as employers in terms of managing our own costs. So Patty, thank you so much for all that great information. Vectra is excited to be part of this. Our portfolios are continuing to grow. We feel really good about where we are in the economy right now. As part of our holding company, Zions Bank Corporation, we're one of the leading lenders to small businesses across the western states. We're also, along with the investment in our customers, we're proud to invest in our vibrant nonprofit community, especially those dedicated to inspiring and preparing our young people to succeed in a global economy. At this event a couple years ago, we started a tradition of making donations in lieu of giveaway items for you. So today we are pleased to recognize yet another prominent nonprofit we're fortunate enough to have in our community, Junior Achievement. We have a brief video about Junior Achievement.
I want to be an interpreter for sign language.
Maybe try to be a lawyer.
I would like to run like a little cafe.
Junior Achievement gives young people the skills they need to own their economic success, plan for their future, and make smart academic choices. Our volunteers help students with financial literacy, work readiness, and entrepreneurship.
And it's really helping me understand how it's going to be in the future.
Let's congratulate Junior Achievement on the incredible things they do in our community. And I'd like to welcome the staff of Junior Achievement. They're with us today. We're pleased to honor you with a donation this year, and would all of you please stand and be recognized for the great work that you do. Where's Junior Achievement? Over here. Thank you. Thank you so much. I like to see all that young energy. You guys are going to be the future of our city and our state. So now I'm really excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Bert White. You know, sometimes you hear speakers at events like this and they come with canned presentations. As I was meeting with Bert this morning, he said, you got to stall until a little bit after 8 o'clock because the new manufacturing numbers come out at 8 o'clock, and depending upon what they say, I'm going to change my speech. So, hell, I like him just for that reason. But I'm really excited to have him here today because he's regularly sought after by the national media, including CNBC, Fox Business, Bloomberg, and others. Many of you have probably seen him on TV. He's the managing director of research and chief investment officer for our partner LPL Financial. Our Vectra Wealth Management Advisory Group is supported by LPL Financial, which provides an integrated platform of proprietary technology, brokerage, and investment advisory services to more than 14,000 LPL advisors across the country. In his role, Bert sets the vision for superior research, which enables the delivery of what LPL Financial calls conflict-free, objective investment advice. Prior to joining LPL Financial in 2007, he served as the director of research for Wachovia Securities and as an investment analyst for Mercer Investment Consulting. I think you're going to be excited to hear from Bert today. Please welcome him to the stage.
No. Bruce, thank you for that intro. That was exactly the way I wrote that. Exactly. It was exactly. Hello, everyone. And not since the signing of the Declaration of Independence has this many smart people been in one room. It's astounding. It's an honor to be here. What Vectra does to bring a community together is so rare anymore. It takes great leadership to do that. And so I want to thank you for the great leadership that you provide in bringing a community together for an event like this. It's really exciting. I've got a zillion things to talk about. So I'm going to talk at about 400 words per minute with occasional gust to 700 words per minute because I got to get through a lot of stuff today, all right? You did stall long enough. We did get that in. And I'm going to change slightly my presentation because of it. Our forecast that we put together in December was really that we thought we would get routine outcomes this year, but how we would get there would be anything but routine. The anything but routine we have gotten, we're on track for that, but the routine outcomes we'll have to see. What do we mean by routine outcomes? We thought that this would be a middle single-digit rate of return year for the market. We still are holding to that, but the odds are increasing that maybe some trouble is around the corner. We're going to talk about that in a second. Here is what the recession odds now. Let me just get this right out of the way. Are we in a recession? No, we are not in a recession. By any stretch of the imagination, we are currently not in a recession. Are there recession odds and are they building? Absolutely. In my mind, the recession odds have doubled in the last month and a half. In December, I would have said 10%. Today, I say 20. The numbers I just got about 2.5 minutes ago, I would up that to 30. What just came out was ISM the service part of our economy. That is 80% of our economy, and that is what has been doing so well. It is at record levels. Make no doubt about it. Manufacturing part of our economy is already in a recession. It is. It has been in a recession for almost 18 months now. But that's okay, because it's about 7% of our economy. But 80% is us. It's us going to get a Bloomin' Onion. It's us going to Carnival Cruise Lines. It's going skiing. It's going to Walmart. That's us. And what we got a reading on with just a few minutes ago was December was very soft for the services side of the economy. Are we starting to see the contagion of a strong dollar, of plunging oil prices and manufacturing? I would say that the recession odds is growing. Now, the market's pulled back quite a bit. I haven't seen what the market's doing today quite yet with this news. But typically in recessions, markets pull back 40%. If you say we have about a 25% odds that we're there, 25% of 40 is about 10. Makes sense if the market's down about 10. I think the market's being pretty rational. I think it's pricing in the right odds right now. But what are the odds it gets worse? And that's what we really got to think about. Where is oil going? What is it going to look like? So today, or at least yesterday, oil was at $31 a barrel. To put this into perspective, that is less than a barrel of coffee or milk or even water. And even more than that, it is way less than a barrel of Chanel No. 5. If you're looking for a whole barrel of Chanel No. 5, it will cost you right around $250,000. You want to know what's really expensive is ink. Ink is unbelievably expensive. Even nail polish is expensive. The point here is oil is next to nothing. And I'm going to spend a lot of time on oil today. I get more questions about oil. What's happened with oil? Why is the market following oil? Is oil going to zero? Is it coming back? What's happened to the energy sector? I'm going to spend about half my time on oil because I think it frames where we are, and we'll get onto this in a second. Here is what oil has done. Oil has collapsed dramatically. We were not that long ago above 100. We're now at 30. Lord knows today we could be in the 20s. I have no idea where we are. My guess is we are lower today on this news. And the market, however, has largely continued to move higher. Here lately we've seen this pull back, but not too dramatically. Here's the story that we've been told, however, is that lower energy prices is good for us. We pay less money, and that is true. This is how much all of us are paying in energy across all of our households here in the U.S. To put this into perspective, we are saving roughly $150 billion because of the lower energy costs to consumers. Divide that by 115 million households across the U.S. That means, on average, each household is saving about $1,300. And that's real money. That's good news. This should be good for our economy. Then why are we worried about it? Well, the big key is, how do you set the right price for oil? And what we've learned in microeconomics is it's all supply and demand. So let me talk a little bit about supply and demand. Here's demand. We are traveling more than we've ever traveled. The roads are not quite congested here in Denver, but they are congested where I live in Boston. And you can see this is the average year-over-year change in vehicle miles traveled, and we are traveling a lot. The case against a recession is, notice leading into the Great Recession how miles began to start getting lower and lower and lower and lower and lower and lower leading into the recession. We're not seeing that now. We're seeing a continued increase in the miles. We're still going on road trips and headed to Utah and driving to the Grand Canyon. We're doing that still. Here's overall demand. Overall demand for oil and energy continues to move higher. We don't have a demand problem. We have a supply problem, a big supply problem. The white line ends up to be U.S. production of oil. You can see that it just ramped up dramatically, and that is the U.S. energy renaissance that has happened here around Colorado, but also all the mountain states, has been dramatically huge and very positive overall for our economy. And I believe, my personal opinion, is it will be the greatest advantage we will have, particularly over China, over the next, say, 3 decades. Why? Our energy independence will allow us to keep relatively low energy costs, which will be good for manufacturing, given the fact that, most importantly, about 20% of the cost of manufacturing a good on average is energy cost. So therefore, having energy independence is a real important key. The important part is to see what's happening. We're going through a supply adjustment process now. This is the orange line is the number of rig counts. You can see rig counts are going dramatically lower. It has a delayed effect. You can see as the rig counts began to move higher, it took a while for the white line or production to move higher. It takes a while to get online. The same is true when you begin to take them offline. It takes a while for that supply adjustment process to go through. We're going through it as we speak. But it's more than just supply and demand. It's a much bigger story with oil. But before I get to that, unfortunately for you, I have to tell a story. I have 4 kids. Does anyone in the room have more kids than me? God bless you. How many kids do you have? 6. Does anyone have more than 6? God bless you, sir. How many are daughters? 4. That's why you're excited to come here today. I have 4 kids, and they're all daughters. God has blessed me with that. I can say that I tell people I have 8 kids because girls count twice. Raising girls it counts twice. Their names, Morgan and Taylor, they are twins, and they are 18 years old. That is awful. I have a 13-year-old. Her name is Dylan. Dylan shortened to Dill. Dill became Dill Pickles, and now she's just Pickles. And then Olivia is our 6-year-old, and Olivia, who is 6, and we call her Olive now. And so we have Olive, we have Pickles, and we're going to rename the twins Celery and Carrot. It'll be like a relish tray. Anyway, I digress. We were having a problem. Pickles, a while ago, would wake up in the middle of the night and get into bed with mom and dad. And this was no problem for my wife, because once she's out, she's out. But for me, I'm a light sleeper. Once she got into bed, I was up for the night, and this was not working for Dad. So I had to keep Pickles out of our bed. So I did what any responsible father would do. I tried to set traps for her. I set across a little wire in the hallway so that in the middle of the night when she would come through, she'd trip over it and fall and make a noise. It's carpeted, it's okay. She would fall and make a noise, and I'd get her and I'd put her in her room, and that was doing great. We were saving, I was sleeping better, and she was beginning to sleep in her room. Finally, she knew about the tripwire, so I had to put a can of soda that was empty with some marbles in it so that it would ring, and did everything I possibly could, and it was working. And then I had to go on a week-long trip. And I knew without my leadership that family would not keep Pickles out of bed with mom. So I went to the twins and said, it's your responsibility. Your responsibility. I went on my trip, and I flew back on the red eye from California, and I landed just in time, and I knew it was going to be tight to try to go and see an award ceremony at their school. I got in early, I hustled to get there, and I got in right at the end. I came into the back, it was a packed house just like this. I'm at the very back, and one of my daughters, Morgan, was on the stage along with several of her other folks, and they were getting recognized, and it was really great. And when she saw me come in, she did one of those kind of highs like this, it was really cute. She went up to the podium and was awesome and said, I'd like to thank my teachers and my parents and all this other stuff. She was really awesome. And she started to walk away and made eye contact with me and then started to walk back to the podium. I knew I was in trouble when this was happening. She went up to the podium, looked me square in the eye in front of 400 people and said, Dad, while you were gone, good news. No one slept with Mommy. My wife slides in her chair. What does that have to do with this? Absolutely nothing. Let's go back to oil. Here I want to do 3 things as it relates to oil prices and energy that the market has wrong. Number 1, I think we've now discovered that this whole notion of peak oil is silly. There is no such thing as peak oil. We have too much oil. Peak oil is the biggest farce out there as far as I'm concerned. I'm going to make the case for that. Number 2, the anomaly is not that oil is at 30. The anomaly is when oil got to 100. It should never have been at 100. Certainly should never have been at 150. 30 is not that far off. I'll make that case. And lastly is my belief is that we will not run out of oil. We will make oil obsolete before we run out of it. I'm not talking of 5 years or 10 years. I'm talking 50 or 70 years. But we've got plenty of oil to make it over that period. This is the study that was peak oil. This was the report, this was the chart, 1956. And what came out of this particular one was all types of press. Let me go back. Here's the press. Oh my goodness, it won't stay there, will it? Here's the press. It said that we were going to 150. We're running out of oil. We got only 50 years left. No. The world produces $35 billion in oil, barrels of oil a year. That we know of right now, almost 4 trillion barrels. That's almost 110 years of capacity that we know of. And we're expanding it because of fracking and all the stuff that we're finding, new locations, new techniques. We ain't running out of oil anytime soon. The interesting component piece as we begin to dive into this a little bit is the price of oil. This goes back to the beginning of time, not that long, 1946. This is the price of oil, and you note how many times it has actually been above 60? That's the shaded area. Not much. It's only been there a little bit. What I'd like to do is break this down a little bit. Take a look at the first column. I've broken that by decade. Every single decade, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the 2000s, and even this decade, every one of them, the low prices have been below 40. I mean, now I have to update that one. It's 32 now, or 30 or 28, wherever we were. What really is interesting is the last column. Look at the last column. The median price through each of those decades. Is there any one that stands out? This one, at 90. 90 is silly. Oil should never have been at 90. My point here is not the fact that we should be freaking out because oil went from 100 to 30. 30 is where it maybe should be. Maybe not 30, but certainly not 100. There's no case for that. There's no peak oil case. There's no supply and demand case. There's no price case. Over the last 25 years, the average price of oil is 33, where we stand today. Do I think oil needs to be at 30? No. Do I think it's going to go higher? Yes. Do I think we'll be at 100? No. I don't think anytime soon. Will we get there someday? Yes, because the markets will be crazy and get back to peak oil and all that kind of stuff, but we will rationally go back to that minimum column. We will likely always see lower oil prices because that's where it needs to be. Here are the reasons, the new reasons of supply and demand. On the supply side, we have new techniques right here with fracking and all the other ways of driving oil and new locations. Who would have thought we'd find oil in like Nevada and like North Dakota? What is in North Dakota? I don't even know what's in North Dakota, but there's oil. There's oil in Philadelphia, for God's sake. It's everywhere. I could go in my backyard in Boston. There's oil there. It's just everywhere. It's everywhere. But demand on a relative basis will decrease. This is what is interesting. What this shows is the percentage of consumer spending that's related to energy. If you just go back to the 60s, 8% of our take-home pay was energy. Today, it's 4% and moving lower. We're becoming more efficient in how we use it. Here's my favorite stat. In 1880, you had to work 1 hour to buy enough kerosene to light your house for 4 hours. Think about that now. Just to read a book at night for 4 hours, you had to work 1 of your 8 hours to pay for the energy. How much do you think we have to work today for those 4 hours? 2 seconds. We work 2 seconds to pay for 4 hours of electricity to do a lamp. We're getting better at this. We're using less energy on a relative basis. and we're only going to get better. This is the number of barrels of oil it takes to produce $1 of global GDP, to $1 of the global economy. You just go back to the 70s, we needed 14 barrels of oil to make $1 of global GDP. Today, 2 barrels. We've become more efficient in how we use it. And because of that, the growth rate of consumption will slow. We will use more oil. I'm not saying demand is going to fall off the face of the planet. What I am saying is we will be better at how we utilize energy. This is the average miles per gallon in our car that we get. Not too long ago it was 24. Now it's 35. Soon it will be 50. Then it will be 100. Pretty soon we'll go forever on a gallon of gas. We're figuring this stuff out. How about our appliances? That was the efficiency of our appliances. They're much more. Just look at the definition of commodity. The first definition is a good, oil. Look at the third definition, obsolete. Just was a commodity. My personal opinion is we will make oil obsolete. Not tomorrow, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, 50 or 100 years from now. Oil as we know it has only been the dominant energy source in the world for only a couple hundred years. My guess is that it will be replaced by natural gas, or it will be replaced by solar or wind, or all the jobs that are coming right here in about clean tech in the last year. I don't know when it's going to happen. It's going to be a while. It's going to be a long while. But here's my prediction. We will find an alternative to oil before we run out of it. Peak oil was a farce. Silly. We ain't going to $200 a barrel. That is clear. You want to know a commodity that has exploded? It's this one. People talk about commodities that are in a depression. Yeah, but not this one. This is lithium. This is the new oil of the future. It's my cell phone. It's your cell phone. I don't have to get in the car, waste my gas, go home, turn on my computer, waste electricity, log in to find out what the market did. I could look at my phone and in 2 minutes figure out what it did. This is the new energy source. This is the energy source of the future. People think that Tesla is a car company. Tesla's not a car company. It's a battery company. What Tesla's figured out is that the key to electric vehicles isn't the fact it's electric. We've had electric vehicles forever. I mean, my 18-year-olds, they had those little electric Barbie cars that you'd plug in and they'd ride around the backyard. The problem was the battery wasn't good enough to get them from Denver to Aspen. But they could get around. The problem was the power, it was the battery. It wasn't the fact that we didn't know how to make electrical vehicles. This isn't new. It's battery. This is the new oil. This is the new energy. What will replace oil? I don't know. This is a good start. This isn't in a depression. Quite well. What else we got? What about the contagion risks of oil? This is the one I get. So that's a longer term view. What about the shorter term view? Will this actually impact? Couple of facts. This is our price chart of oil again. And here's what's interesting. Notice before each of those lines, what oil did before a recession. Before every single recession, every single one, oil prices went up, not down. We have never, ever, ever had a recession that was before it happened, oil prices dropped. It's never happened. Not saying it can't. I just told you we have a 30% chance it will happen this time. But it's never happened before. Typically, this is a help, not a hindrance. This is one of the reasons that might keep us from a recession. What's interesting, stay, yes. Philadelphia Fed does a really great spot. You can go out to philadelphiafed.org. It's a really awesome place to look. And they tell you state by state the 3-month status of each state. This is the latest. Do you see a trend in the red? It's all energy related. You got Wyoming, you got Montana, you got Louisiana, you got Mississippi, and even the lighter greens, things like Texas, are not as good as it was. We're starting to see the impacts, the contagion impacts. We're starting to see them. One of the big contagion impacts that we're starting to see is with high yield. High yield is essentially the loans and the lending and the borrowing that has gone out to many of these energy companies. Many of them can't go and get more traditional ways of financing. Many of them have to go to the marketplace and take very high interest rate loans. Those are actually very speculative loans, and we oftentimes call those high yield. What you see is the high yield index, which ends up to be the orange line, has been moving lower. It's been lockstep with what? The price of oil. Why has it been moving lower? Why has high yield bonds dropped 40%? It's because the market is pricing in that virtually all of those energy companies that borrowed money will default and go out of business. What's being priced in right here is 70% default rates in the energy sector. Think about that now. The market is predicting that 70% of folks that have borrowed money to fuel energy will be out of business. Amazing. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Well, if you look at bank failures, here's what it looks like going all the way back to just past the Great Depression. If I had the Great Depression on here, it would just, the scale would be off. It'd be crazy. But what really stands out is the 80s. Look how many more bank failures we had in the 80s than we did even the Great Recession. What was it about that? Well, if you actually look, this is really jumping, isn't it? If you really look at the number of failures and where they happened, half of them in the 80s happened in 4 states. Texas, Oklahoma, Alaska, and Louisiana. What do those have in common? Oil. Oil collapsed. Many bad practices happened. If you look at the practices, one, which was a hallmark case, for those that have studied this, Penn Square in Oklahoma, one of the largest banks there, 80% of their loans were to the energy sector. And instead of the practice of just taking as collateral 30% of the value of energy, of oil, they took 75% of collateral. And when it collapsed, they went out of business. And they should have. That's awful practice. Where we are today, it's nowhere close. Large banks average between 1% and 5% tied to energy. Some of the ones with the most exposure are all under 20 and much better tier 1 capital. So here's, we're just bouncing all over the place here. Here's my thoughts on oil. I believe we've seen the lows for this cycle. I'm not saying we won't go back into the 20s again. I just don't think we're going to go to the low 20s. I think we're close to the lows. Number 2 is I think the contagion risks are growing. Today we saw more of that contagion risk. The service economy is beginning to be impacted. I'm still thinking that it's only a 1 in 3 chance of a recession. That being said, it's grown. 2, we think that oil prices will improve. However, we ain't going to 100. It can't go to 100. We shouldn't. Over the long term, in my view, energy prices will be subdued over time and stay in that 60-ish range. And lastly, we will not run out of oil. We will make it obsolete before we do. Let me turn to something else, but before I do this, let me take you to my second story. My 4 daughters. Yeah, maybe I'll take some water real quick. My daughters, I'm a big hockey fan. Anyone here a hockey fan? No one's a hockey fan? Just Denver, is that it? No Denver Broncos fan, is that it? Mm-hmm. Is that why you invited me from Boston? Mm-hmm. I know the way this works. So really quick, my daughters, I have, again, 4 of them, and I tried to watch a hockey game. My wife went, she was irresponsible, went away with some friends and left them with me. And I did what any irresponsible father would do. I bribed them, took them to Walmart, gave them $20 each, said, find something that would keep you out of my hair for 3 hours. They all bought stuff and came back to the house. The twins combined for a video game. That was great. Pickles, the 13-year-old, she bought something when she was in her room. And Olivia bought one of those tea sets, you know, one of those like Barbie tea set things. And she came downstairs and had a tea party with all of her dolls, which was great. Because what happened was she would have the tea set, and every 3 or 4 minutes, she would then go and put some water in one of the glasses and bring it to me, and I was getting parched rooting for my team, and I'd take a little sip of water, and that was great, and it was wonderful. I'd get to check on her. She'd go back to the playroom. It was perfect. They were out of my hair for the first 2 periods. Then in the third period, one of my daughters came down, one of the twins, Taylor. She came down, sat down with me, and just right on cue comes Olivia with my next bit of tea. Take the tea. She runs off. And then Taylor says, Dad, where's she getting the water? Now, I hadn't thought of that. I started thinking of the geography of the house and where she's coming from. There's only 2 rooms. There's a playroom and a restroom. And I say confidently, out of the sink, Taylor, of which he responds, she's too short, Dad. Then it hits me. Just then, Olivia comes around the corner with my next stain of tea. I freeze her in her tracks. Olivia, have you been giving Daddy potty water? Her heart breaks. I mean, she's just the only of the 3 of my kids, the only one that still talks to me. The only one that likes me. I broke her heart. She comes and gives me a hug, and of course she didn't do that. Give her a hug, and she says, Dad, I never give you potty water, ever. I told Taylor, see, she loves me. She begins to walk off. I take a sip confidently, and she begins to walk off, turns around and says, I didn't get out of the potty. Got it out of that dog dish. Sorry. So let's talk about these. What else are we looking at? Let's first talk about politics. I'm not a political person, but really quick, here's a couple of really quick thoughts. The interesting thing is again, I'm not here, I'm not pro-Democrat, I'm not pro-Republican. My job is to make you money regardless of who is the president. I don't care. Here's a few thoughts. It's really interesting to see the comparison of the Republican Party now versus 2008. Think of what that looked like. A young African-American man versus a very old white guy. What does Republicans look like now? They have an African-American man trying to become president. They have 2 Hispanics trying to become president and a bunch of young folks. And the Democrats are a bunch of old people. I'm not saying that that's different. I'm not saying what that means. But what I will say, it's interesting. It's a very interesting component piece. Second, the thing about Trump in Iowa, a lot of folks are saying, oh my gosh, what a surprise. Here's the interesting part. It's not so much a surprise. I think Nate Seeler said it best. He said it's the first time someone actually had to go and vote for him. And we saw what that meant. Again, I'm not a pro-Trump or anti-Trump. I'm just saying we're now beginning to see what that means. It will be very interesting to see what that looks like going into New Hampshire and South Carolina. Third is, make no doubt about it, millennials are crucially important. And you think about the millennials' impact is going to be huge. Why are they so important? One of the big reasons is two things. Number one is they are the most indebted generation in the history of our country. Let me say that again. No generation has been more indebted ever than millennials. Not only do they share a big portion of our national debt, which is huge, they have student loans burdened by them. And the second, don't think that doesn't influence them. And here's the second thing. They are the very first generation in over 60 years that watched a huge dislocation of their parents. If you don't think millennials are infected by the fact that not only did they see a recession, but they saw their mom and dad lose their jobs and lose their homes, and that doesn't impact them, you're crazy. Of course it does. We haven't had a generation that's been affected by that, and they are harboring that. That will impact how they buy, it will impact how they live, it will impact how they vote, and they are the swing factor, make no doubt about it. And the last part is know what the biggest key is. There's only been one president, let me say it again. The number one factor that determines who will win, the number one factor, it is what did the economy do the year prior to the election with wage growth, net of taxes, net of inflation. If wage growth is higher by more than 2%, positive after taxes and after inflation, every single incumbent party has won. If it is below, every single incumbent party has lost, except for one, and that was Barack Obama last time. It is held true every single election. If you want to know who will win, all you need to know is, are we getting, as Americans, pay raises or not after inflation and taxes? That will tell you who will win. Next, the manufacturing economy is slipping. I told you about ISM. This is ISM in the red. Anything below 50 means we are moving into a contraction. You can see that that number is well into the red, and we are in contraction, make no doubt about it. That means we are in a recession as it relates. This is looking at 6-month forwards, but at the end of the day, that has a big impact on earnings. You can see the huge impact, and what you see is that corporate profits are very largely tied to how strong our manufacturing economy is. We're beginning to see that spillover. It's why our recession odds have increased from 10 to 20, and then today from 20 to 30. We're starting to see the contagion. I'm not saying we will have a recession. I'm saying the odds have increased. The Fed. The Fed didn't do this market any services and any good things. It painted itself into a corner. It said if jobs continue to be great, we will raise rates. The problem was the economy, as good as it was in the employment front, wasn't great in other places. Why are we raising rates when 10% of our economy is in a recession? And that's what the market is asking now. This is a great slide that shows the impact of how important monetary policy has been. The black line is just a fancy way of looking at easy monetary policy. You can see it's largely quantitative easing. And you can see the black line as it went up. This was easy monetary policy. It's the Fed helping to spur the economy with quantitative easing and low rates. You can see that dotted line that says end of Q3. It should say end of QE3. That was the end of that. And you can see how it leveled out. Notice how the market has followed leveling out and now moving lower. This market was very much fueled on easy monetary policy, and as the Fed has begun to back off the punch bowl, thus the same is true as it relates to our economy. I believe now the Fed has looked at what's happening and they are on hold. I believe the Fed isn't going to raise rates anytime soon. We're still thinking at the end of the year, if we divert a recession, they will start raising rates again. But I think that what you're going to hear from Janet at her Humphrey Hawkins testimony coming up in the next couple of weeks, you will hear her say that the Fed is data dependent, and right now the data sucks. And they're not raising rates because of it. This economy is crucial. Here's the second thing about this. Well, let me see what else I got in here. Second thing is about the Fed. When we think about the Fed, here's all of the interest rate cycles 1 year after. It's a really busy chart. I want you to focus on two things. The first thing I want you to focus on is the stuff way to the left. That's right after, the first 25, 50, and 75 days after the Fed raises rates. Most of them are where? Negative. The market doesn't like it when they begin to do a rate increase. They never have liked it, ever. Whether it's right or wrong, it's always been stinky. Not always, but usually. Notice what happens as you get later in the year. Most of them are positive. The market begins to understand it. It realizes the pace. It prices it in. Rate increases, changes in cycles begin rocky for markets. The second observation here, there are dotted lines and there are solid lines. The dotted lines are where the Fed raised rates quickly. Notice all the dotted lines do the bottom. The solid lines are where the Fed raised rates slowly. They slowly raise rates. Those are near the top. We are in a slow rate rise environment. The Fed's on hold right now and will be slow. Because of that, that will help the market digest it, hopefully bypass the recession. Here's a couple of other thoughts on the Fed. The first thing is that the Fed is the only major central bank in the world that's tightening. Every other bank, ECB in Europe, the Bank of China, the Bank of Japan, every other place, Australia, every place, not every major, is easing. We're tightening. Now, it makes some sense. We were the first into this recession. We were the first out of the recession, which makes sense. We'd be the first to begin to tighten and normalize rates. That being said, we do think they're not in lockstep with the rest of the world. The second thing is, should the Fed have raised rates in the first place? Think about what growth was on average for all of last year. U.S. growth was at 2%, and we're raising rates? And Europe's growth was at 1.5%, and they're lowering rates? There ain't much difference between 1.5 and 2, my friends. I do think the Fed got a little over their skis. I think they know it now. I think they're backtracking. The interesting part is we just heard, who heard about Japan going to negative interest rates? You want to hear about that? Think about this. 25% of the world's economy is now under negative interest rates. Not low, negative. What that means is that banks have to pay to hold their money at the central bank. They have to pay. They don't get interest. They have to pay interest. Now, the thought is that will spur them to lend more and so forth. but we're starting to see lending cycles tighten. The market is already beginning to tighten. We just recently got the Fed actually goes and surveys bank loan officers and says, tell me, is your standards for giving a loan tightening or easing? Are you giving more loans out easier, or are you raising your standards? What do you think the recent tick was? They're getting tighter. It's a little harder to get a loan. They're nervous about what the economy looks like, and you're starting to see that come through. Not dramatically, we're still relatively low, but you're starting to see it come through. Have no idea what I skipped? No. Yep, let's see. It doesn't want to stay on anything, does it? It's all over. I mean, it's like got a gremlin in it or something. What's going on? Let's just go here. So this ends up to be the consumer. This is housing. We heard from Patty a lot about how housing has done well. Housing continues to be very affordable. You can see in the Great Recession, which is that dip that moves lower, housing got quite expensive. We moved higher. Higher means that we are more affordable. Houses got very affordable. You could see the Great Recession coming out of that. We begin to backtrack that. Home prices are beginning to move higher, but we're still well above in the affordability as it relates to home lending, or not home lending, but home ownership and values, which is very good. The next thing is about the consumer. This is the consumer's balance sheet. We have been deleveraging. We've been deleveraging our debt. We've been paying off our credit cards. We've been doing a wonderful job of reducing the amount of debt we have, which means that consumers are in a better place, I believe, to be able to weather any particular downtime. And this is what I really want to focus on. There's a lot of folks that are trying to compare right now to the period right before the Great Recession. I could tell you that we still might move into a recession, 30% odds, but it's very different. Right now is very, very, very different than it was in 2007. Here's a few examples. The Fed was at 425 basis points. Today it's at 25. You look at where mortgage rates were, it was almost 7% to get a 30-year loan. Now it's under 4. The yield curve was inverted. We have never, ever, ever had a recession without an inverted yield curve. Where are we today? We're nowhere close to inversion. 200 basis points is the difference between long bonds and short bonds on the yield curve. You just go right down the list. You got on and on and on and on and on and on. Real wage growth was declining. Now it's rising. Oil prices was going through the roof. Now it's declining. All these elements, these are the reasons why we will either bypass a recession or we will have a mild one. I still believe that the greatest odds is that the Fed doesn't raise rates between now and, say, the end of the year. That begins to put more easy monetary policy back into the U.S. That consumers begin to see that this is a blip, that we don't see a downtick in hiring, and that we bypass a recession. However, contagion is growing, and we got to be careful. If that is the case, we have to be ready for volatility, my friends. We are so spoiled in this bull market that we didn't have any. What we're going through right now is normal. It's part of the investment routine. This is every single calendar year going back a long way. You can see most of them are up and very few are down. The market goes up a lot more than it goes down. But here's the part I really want you to focus on is the little numbers along the bottom. That's the biggest pullback in any calendar year. Look at them. 7, 10, 19, 16, 10, 14, 17, 12, 19, 11. This is normal. We're off 10% year to date. This is normal. In fact, on average, each year drops about 14% at some point in time during the year. What's unusual is we just started right out of the gates dropping. And it doesn't feel great. But the reality is volatility is normal. If I could tell you anything, if you had any piece of advice, it is have a plan and stick with your plan. Because your plan anticipates things like this, even recessions, even downturns, even reductions. By deviating from your plan is the biggest thing and the biggest mistakes that investors make. There's a reason why you have a plan. You probably put a plan in when you were rational and not irrational with the market going down. Stay with your plan. Final market thoughts. I would have done 2 other slides, but they just passed it so fastly I didn't even know what they were. Final market thoughts. The recession odds are growing. I have here 20. As of about an hour ago, I've increased that to more like 30. We'll watch. It's going to be nip and tuck here. We'll see how it works. The services side of our economy continues to be strong, but it's beginning to see the contagion of being weighed down by declining oil prices, by a strong dollar, and by a recession in the manufacturing part of the economy. Oil appears to be bottoming, but understand that a bottoming in a market is not a day. It is a process. It's a process of bulls and bears establishing the right values. At the bottoms, there's lots of volatility. You'll see a day that oil goes down 7, and the next day it'll be up 7, and the next day it'll be down 5, and the next day it'll be up 5. That's a sign of a bottoming process. And we're moving through that process as we speak right now. We believe stocks will follow earnings. They always do. And at this part of the cycle where valuations aren't that cheap, earnings is without a doubt the biggest fuel. The question is, where will earnings be? This quarter, 70% of companies are beating earnings. That's the good news. The bad news is the average company is minus 4% year over year in profits, meaning they're earning 4% less this quarter than they did 4 quarters ago. That's pretty tough, pretty tough. We're watching that. If we just have a soft spot here and not a recession, I believe that earnings growth will rebound in the second half to mid-single digits, and that's where we will get our routine outcomes of mid-single digit rates of return for stocks. If we go into a recession, that won't happen. Next, the Fed's likely on hold for a while, and they're probably going to be hold for a little bit of time as they begin to stabilize this. And lastly, patience, not panic. Follow your plan. It's the most important strategy. So let me just end with this. Oh my God, this thing's killing me. Let me see if I can go back here. Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh, it all just fell apart. I mean, the whole world just died. Does anyone have any idea? Let me just end with this. We are going into a recession now. My odds just massively increased. I'll do it from memory. So my passion is not the markets. It's my job. So my passion is where the markets and life meets. That's what I care most about. This is why this community is so important. It's why being a leader in our community is so important. What I care about is how those things interact. And I think that is the most important element, and that's what drives me. I believe our greatest addiction in this country is negativity. I was on TV not too long ago, and maybe people didn't agree with what I said, but in the comments, there were 2,000 comments, and many of them were, I hope you die along with the bull market, and all kinds of crazy stuff. First of all, who are these people that comment? Why are we have this level of negativity? I took my family last summer to the Grand Canyon, and we had a chance to walk through it and just have family time. And on that trip, I began to reminisce and realize about thankfulness. And it hit me that maybe I was working a little too hard, and maybe I lost some perspective. I thought about what my grandfather told me a long time ago. He had one of the greatest lines I've ever heard. It's always stayed with me. He said, Bert, the grass is not greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it, where you take care of it, where you nurture it. It's true. If we all took our problems and put them in a big pile, and you could choose anyone from the pile, and my guess is you'd take yours right back. We'd love to talk about them. Negativity, it's the biggest addiction. It's the biggest problem. It ain't a recession. That's not the biggest problem we have in America. In my opinion, it's a degradation of the family. Number one, it's negativity. Last story. I was doing homework with my daughter, Olivia, just the other day. And her homework was that she had to come up with the defense mechanisms of animals. What do they do under stress? What do they do? How do they protect themselves? So the first one was a cheetah, and she said, be fast and run away. How about the gecko? It's to camouflage and hide. Or what about the turtle? It's go in its shell and get away from everybody. The lion was to roar. Jellyfish is to sting people and hurt them. And the last one was butterfly. She thought about it for a while, and she said, be beautiful. That needs to be what we do under stress. Be beautiful. Thanks for having me.
I've been to a lot of economic events. I've heard a lot of speakers. I don't think I've ever been quite so inspired. Thank you so much. That was really, really powerful. And I didn't know that I could listen at 700 words a minute, but I think I came pretty close. So thank you. And Tom Clark, lithium, right? Is that where you're headed from this point forward? Bert, thank you very much. That was just fabulous. Before we get to our Q&A, I'd like to just quickly honor the winner of our annual prediction survey. As you know, every year after this event, we send a survey to all of you asking for your predictions on things like where the stock market ended, unemployment, and mortgage rates. And we actually had one individual who guessed them all right. Is Cliff Weinberger here? He's in the back. We've got a gift certificate up here for you for your great decision. So congratulations. And maybe you and Bert ought to hook up. You can help him in his forecast projections for the recession. Also, this year's survey will be in your email boxes later this morning, and also to ask you to provide us some information about this event, things you liked about it, because every year we try to make it better, to be beautiful, Bert. So we have a few minutes left. We have microphones around the room, and we've gotten some questions in from the webcast. And the question, I guess I'm going to take the prerogative of the chair and start with the first question that I think others have asked as well. And this one is directed to Bert. Bert, you talked about the U.S., you talked about Fed, you talked about oil prices. One of the other things we hear a lot is about the global economies and especially China. What impact is all that going to have on this, and how does that weigh into your recessionary projections?
Yeah, sure. So China is a really interesting cat, right? China's trying to get to where we are, to move from a manufacturing-based economy to a service-based economy. It is a tough move, and it's a tough transition. What really has hurt China is their one-child policy. What a lot of people don't realize is that last year, China peaked with working-aged adults. From this point on, China will have fewer working-aged adults for every year for the next 30 years. Think about that now. They will have less working-aged adults between now on because of their one-child policy. The very interesting component piece of this is what that means to their manufacturing part of their economy. If you have less workers, what does that mean for the workers you have? You have to pay them more, which means they're less competitive, which means they can't compete. And you're starting to see that. You've been seeing that. Right now, my view is that the world of manufacturing is changing. There's no longer the world of putting a Barbie head on a Barbie body, putting it in a Barbie box and sending it off on some boat from China. Those days are gone. Now we build robots that puts a Barbie head on a Barbie body that puts it in that. And those jobs don't have to be in China, because the world's greatest folks that come with international, it's sort of the new manufacturing, it is not folks that get paid $12 an hour to put Barbie heads on Barbie bodies. The new manufacturing is computer engineers and robotics that change manufacturing. I believe that is coming back to the U.S. And so when I look at China and look at the rest of the world, there is problems there. The good news is low interest rates, accommodative policies, 25% of the world's under negative interest rates. I believe that Europe is stabilizing. I believe China will have a soft landing, not a hard landing. That will be a catalyst for growth as we go forward. And with that, I think that will be a possible help that might divert us away from a recession.
Another question that's somewhat related that again came in through the webcast about negative interest rates. I don't think any of us have really thought about that very much. Are negative interest rates monetary policy run amok? And does this mean that someday that customers will be paying banks to hold their money just like we have to pay the Fed?
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's going to pass through yet, but they're talking about it, right? Here's the interesting part. There's already been banks in Europe, one by the name of Julius Baer, for very large balances, their very biggest accounts. Their institutional accounts, they are now charging them to hold their cash balances above a certain level. So they are beginning to pass that on. Will that happen in the United States? I'm not so sure. What we will see, however, is a continued low rate environment. Think about your savings account. What do you get? Not a lot. There's been many, in fact, that has moved to 0.001%. Put that in perspective. If Julius Caesar put in $100 at 0.001 interest rate, today he would have $2 in interest. Here's what the world misses. The world misses that we as a country receive more interest than we pay. So having low interest rates over time actually hurts us more than it helps. With our savings accounts and other things, we make more interest. We should make more interest than we pay. And so having low interest rates over time actually is a hurt to the global economy over long periods of time. We've got to get this economy back and then get interest rates normalized so that we can actually get back to where hardworking Americans, especially those that are under a fixed budget, can actually have a more stable, normalized interest rate environment. I think that will at some point in time happen, but it is monetary policy, some degree run amok, but it's also because we have such a fragile global economy that it requires pretty severe tools and instruments to try to spur it on.
All right, one more question from me for Patty this time, and then we'll open it up to all of you. Patty, you talked about the real estate market in Denver being really solid. You talked about the creation of, I think you said 5 million square feet across all property types of new building, new construction. But I also hear that there's 1 million square feet in space being given back by these energy companies. What does that mean for our real estate economy in the future? And if there is a 30% chance of recession, should all our real estate friends here in the first row be nervous about that?
Well, certainly we have been tracking the whole sublease space issue because that is growing, that is getting to be a bit of a concern in this region. I think that it's, as we were writing our monthly economic indicators report, noticing again that there have been a lot of announcements of, again, new projects. I think that moving forward, we need to make sure that the projects are really making sense. I think that you need to really be doing your work in the marketplace. Make sure that indeed that your project is well placed. Make sure that you have some pre-leasing going on. I think that I'm getting a little bit concerned about any type, whether this is the environment for further speculative types of projects. I think we need to make sure that we have that pre-leasing in place now.
Great. Okay. Anybody in the audience like to ask a question? Again, we've got mics around the room. Yes, sir, right here. You can speak up from there. The question for the audience, why don't you repeat that to him?
I'm not sure that I heard the last part of your question. Okay, so the question was that I talked about that we've been building about, on average, 17,000 new housing units per year. But how does that compare with our current household formation? Fabulous point. Thank you for the question. These days, during the Great Recession, when we were building next to nothing, we saw that household formation continued. We were an area that you continue to see in migration. So certainly a lot of the construction activity that we have going on right now is still filling in the gap of that whole deficit that was created during the Great Recession. So I think that the fact now that we're building around 18,000 units is maybe even, dare I say, still a little bit lower than what we should have to really fully fill in that whole household formation gap. But we're mighty close. I think that we are very, very close to that equilibrium value right now.
I want to honor our commitment to get you out at 9 precisely, as we always do, but we have time for one or two more. Anybody else want to throw up a question? Yes, in the back.
Ability to consume is income plus debt. And the millennials are heavily in debt at the beginning of their life, and incomes are somewhat flat. What does that mean for asset prices as baby boomers go from net buyers to net sellers with no natural buy?
Yeah, so it's a great question, right? We are in somewhat, so let me maybe rephrase the question. The question is about, are we in a little bit of a tight spot? You've got baby boomers that are beginning to retire, and so therefore they're thinking about maybe not investing in stocks as much as they were and moving to more of a fixed income heavy portfolio, and so therefore maybe net sellers of stocks. And then you look at millennials where they have a huge debt burden, and maybe right now I haven't really started thinking about retirement yet, and we do know that millennials as a percentage own a lot less stocks than do most of their other generations that are older. So what does that mean from a demographic perspective for the demand for stocks? The truth is that there is less of a demand there, right? I mean, those are all very difficult spots. We are in a very interesting and to some degree negative demographic cycle here as it relates to the watching stock prices. The big component piece that we have to remember is what really drives stock prices is not necessarily net buyers versus sellers, although that's a big component piece. The biggest component that drives is earnings. If you see earnings increase, then people are willing, and stock prices follow those earnings, they're willing to pay more for those names. And so you're going to end up seeing stock prices move higher with earnings. And so while the demographic issue is a huge one, and at the margin a negative bias towards asset prices, we believe the biggest component, without a doubt, is earnings. And if earnings come through, stock prices rise. If earnings do not, like they're not this quarter, stock prices decline.
So I think you can see why Metro Denver economy is so strong, because we have such a great economist in Patty. And you can see why we're so proud to have LPL as our partner, because all of us are really going to pay attention to the advice that Bert gives us relative to what's going on in the economy. So please help me thank them for being here today. And because this is Super Bowl weekend, and a day would not be appropriate without acknowledging our friends, the Broncos, that we have a little gift for both of our speakers, but in particular because one of them is from Boston, we figured it was appropriate to have a Bronco pendant for them.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Go Broncos, right? It's going to be an exciting weekend. Thank you so much for being here. This is a really important event for us. Really helps us think about the future ahead. Hopefully it provides you the kind of information you need to help guide your companies, your families, your business forward. We appreciate those of you who are customers. Those who aren't yet, we look forward to making you customers. And let's all pay attention to Bert's advice about not being negative and moving forward, believing in the butterfly. Congratulations, and thank you all very much. Have a wonderful 2016.